Hello and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Tom Ritchie and I'm really pleased today to be joined by John Mills. Hi, John.
Hi Tom, good to be here. Good to be here.
Amazing. How you doing? You good?
I am. I'm good today, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to our conversation. Hopefully, it's going to be interesting for you and I and everybody concerned.
Yeah, I'm sure it will be. I wonder, John, could you give us a little bit more about your current roles and what brings you to this conversation on AI, please?
For 14 years, I have been working in research and innovation at the University of Central Lancashire. So, my professional background is media journalism specifically. I used to work for a startup and I've run newsrooms, creating online products and content. But I transitioned into academia and have really been interested in emerging technologies. And this is pretty much from the late noughties. That's what I've been doing. And all of my work is, I would say, practice based. So I don't study emergent technology from a distance. I actually work with technologists, industry, uh, engineers, aerospace, whoever is relevant, and we will create new things. We will build new things, particularly prototypes, mainly with communities, either members of the public, geographic communities, or communities of practice. And we learn through doing, basically, which I'm sure you're very well aware of. So, as part of that journey, I've been working in and around AI technologies for quite some time and have worked with Internet of Things, and we've developed AI prototypes. I've also done a lot of work with drones, unmanned aerial vehicle technology, both from a media and non-media perspective. And I am interested in AI because they are AI, but they're autonomous systems, and there is absolute crossover, but there's separation as well. Most recently, I left the university to set up my own business as well as do a couple of other things. And in the last 12 months, I've been working with newsrooms, particularly on one project with a small newsroom up in Cumbria, helping them to create AI tools for editorial. So I'm media, journalism, I'm interested in new tech, making new tech. And as part of that work, I have absolutely encountered AI. But I should say, in this long kind of monologue of introduction, that I am not a technologist. So I work with tech, but I don't physically and personally produce it.
Amazing. Thank you. And it sounds like you've had a really varied set of experiences that I think will help with the discussion today, from working in an academic context and focusing on new technologies to the fact that you've actually gone and set up a business. We are here to talk a bit more about kind of innovation and entrepreneurship in relation to AI. And I wonder, John, what your thoughts are around, what are the key characteristics from your experience of being a successful entrepreneur and innovator who utilizes and uses AI?
So I guess my immediate response to that is I think you can take AI out of the equation here. I think you can really think about what it means to be an entrepreneur and an entrepreneurial very broadly. And some of this is, I wouldn't say cliched, but they're recognizable traits and terms if you're entrepreneurial, in that you have, I would say for me, the top one is that you've got an attitude to risk that is perhaps different to other people who wouldn't see themselves as entrepreneurial or innovative, in that risk isn't necessarily a bad thing. Risk is fine. And I think the challenge for entrepreneurs is they understand levels of risk and what they need to do to mitigate that risk, and embrace risk and enjoy risk. And I think when you look at a lot of the pop business texts, if you have any business students on your program, they will know this, but kind of terms such as fail forward, actually thinking about we're going to make mistakes, we're going to fail, but the value there is the learning from that failure, in order to drive forward and to develop. So I would say a key element is an attitude to risk, embracing risk, but not necessarily just going down a risk-laden pathway for the sake of it. It's compartmentalizing it and assessing it. And then you can look at other attributes such as being open-minded, creative or not creative. I don't think you have to be creative in in a traditional sense to be entrepreneurial. I think you can harness creativity, but not necessarily kind of be creative. Um, I think in the past I've taught on leadership programs, and I think there's a really close connection between leadership and entrepreneurialism. Um, and I don't necessarily mean that just through leading teams. I think kind of leading thought as well is an attribute. Quite often you see entrepreneurs as thought leaders in their sector because they're willing to kind of look at things in a different way. I also think when you look at organizations that there's a different framework for this kind of stuff. So you can have entrepreneurs within organizations, and again, your business and management students will be au fait with intrapreneurial activities as well as entrepreneurial activities. But I think it's really interesting when you look at an organization and ask the question, is that organization innovative? Are they entrepreneurial? And in all the work that I've done, what I see is a level of the technical term is ambidexterity, the ability for organizations to do different things. They can do their core mission fantastically well, it's reliable, people know what they're doing. But organizations that also allow themselves to experiment, they also allow themselves to look at different opportunities. They embed the function of an individual entrepreneur within teams. So you have a team that goes out and looks for new things. You have a team that is related to that team, but they're not charged with going outward. They're in charge with kind of sense making internally. Actually, so is this relevant to us? Could we exploit this? We have organizations that kind of disseminate innovation. They're really good at communicating not just what we need to do, but why we need to do it. So I think it's really intriguing when you look at it, your question from an individual perspective and then an organizational perspective, because there's crossovers, but there are also differences or deconstructed roles. The final thing I would say um, is core characteristics, core attributes of an innovator, entrepreneur, individually and organizationally. They know why they're going to do this. They know why they're working in this field. They know why they're trying to do what they're trying to do. And there's kind of popular business writer, Simon Sinek, and he talks about the power of why. And it is very pop business. And as an academic, you kind of sometimes raise an eyebrow at those texts, but he does really eloquently focusing on, if you don't know why you're doing this stuff, you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. And final thing I'll say, Tom, is Simon Sinek also says the why is often not money. And I think my background is in journalism. Journalists don't do journalism for the money. Trust me, they do it because they want to make a difference. They have a value set that they're trying to uphold. So I think the why is really clear for entrepreneurial characteristics.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that it's, first of all, people don't work in academia for the money either. I think, yeah, and I know you know this. We do it because we want to make a difference, because we want to teach. I think you're right, though. A lot of those characteristics of innovators and innovative organizations, you can learn from looking at them. So I think for our students, you mentioned a lot of what makes an organization good for that kind of AI entrepreneurship and to be an innovative organization. But that confidence to take the risk, I think, is really important. But as you said, not risk for the sake of it. And for me, I think in the context of AI, currently it feels like a risk is actually just using these tools and getting to know them and understanding where to apply them. Definitely your point about why. Think about why you're using AI in your field. What are you hoping to get from it beyond just helping you with mundane tasks? What's the why behind AI? And actually understanding that why, I think, is a really, really crucial component. And I think trust is such an important aspect in this conversation that perhaps we don't talk about enough, which is that to build trust takes so much time, but to lose trust is, it could be in a second. As you say, it could be one article that someone reads and goes, wait, what? That's clearly not true, or made up or hallucinated. And I wonder how we, in our own different environments, can foster a space that can encourage that kind of AI innovation.
Yeah. So I think this works at a number of levels. So let's take the macro level. So if UK government, and not just this administration, previous administrations have seen AI as a focus point for economic development and growth, and has included this in uh, funding missions. UKRI, for example, the Research and Innovation Funding Agency in the UK, it's a core tenet of what they want to see happening kind of in the UK. So there is kind of government publicly mandated funds that are going into AI at the very top level, but ultimately a main driver of that is economic growth. And we could have a long philosophical podcast on whether economic growth maps across sustainability and happiness, for example. It's not always a good thing. So I guess what we need to see at the top level is kind of state and industrial support for exploring these AI opportunities. So government are in this, increasingly you see in venture capital. I mean, you have done for a long time now, but venture capital is following AI. Kind of stories from Canada where they're trying to combat the brain drain going to Silicon Valley by kind of creating dedicated AI innovation hubs. So that needs to happen at the top level. At the same time, I think there's a general public perception question. So, new technology is never going to be adopted if members of the public and users are not minded to take it up. Are they scared of it? Do they think it's a bad thing? We see this over and over and over again in innovation examples. It's ultimately end users who make a technology successful or not. It doesn't have to be the most successful technology from a developer's perspective. It's just the one that speaks to users. So I think understanding the public debate and the public perceptions of AI is also critical. And I mean, maybe later I can talk about a project we did that looks at that a little bit around autonomous systems. And then we get back to the echoes of our last kind of part of our conversation, Tom, which is organizations, whether they be commercial or charitable, they need to look at how this could work for them and their client base or their users or their donors. How could they use this technology to help them achieve what they want to achieve in a more effective and impactful way? And another element to this that occurs to me that we might get on and talk about in more detail if it's relevant to the program, but sometimes AI is seen as AI, interpreted as AI, but it's just computers. It's just computers doing computer stuff, and it's got this kind of label attached now, which is this new thing that is going to change the world. It's just digitization, and it's, yes, generative does present something new, particularly to the media, but actually, businesses and organizations have been dealing with this for decades. It's just got a new label. And at the individual level, and I'm sure that this is what the program is asking your participants to do. It's thinking, so what does this mean for me? How can this make my life better? How can it make my life more easy? How can it help me achieve what I want to achieve? So that kind of explorative, open mindset around this is really interesting. And hey, I mean, I've been working in technology for years, but my original background is English and English literature. You would think, is this really relevant to me? But yeah, it absolutely is. Because it makes me ask questions in new ways.
Again, it feels like we're coming back to a similar theme here for businesses and organizations trying to create space for AI innovation. And again, it comes back to trust. It comes back to this idea of the why, and also this focus on the kind of narrative that perhaps has been attached to AI that we see through social media, where it's either super intelligence or it's utopia. There is nothing in between. We are either doomed or we're all out of a job. And I think the reality, as we know, is somewhere perhaps in the middle of that. You started to touch on what's really in my next question, which is, what do you think really are the challenges and opportunities for businesses to really adopt this AI technology beyond the need to be able to communicate well and to be able to create these spaces? Do you see any other key challenges there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the core of a challenge is translation, i.e., what does this mean for us? That's hard because things are developing and so quickly in terms of capabilities and impacts. So the challenge is just the comprehension of what does this mean, what could this mean, and then the arising question of how do we navigate it, what do we do, and that's very kind of broad, but I think it's fundamental. I would say specifically with AI, and again leaning on my background as media and journalism, and we've talked about this, but the issues of trust is really crucial to this, because as soon as that asset is removed from a media publisher, your business is gone. And I say that, I guess some media out there of all different sizes are kind of are publishing that kind of content that you might not trust, but it caters for a certain worldview in all different political persuasions. So yeah, maybe it's not a concrete one, but I do think it's essential, and that manifests itself across lots of different businesses, because as soon as you automate something that has previously not been automated, then if you can't trust it to do what it needs to do, then there's a big risk there. So opportunities, I think, actually, I'm going to kind of take a different tack on this if I can, Tom. So you mentioned how do kind of people and organisations kind of meet those challenges. There's a publisher in Denmark called Ekstra Bladet, and they're a tabloid publisher. So tabloids are different in Denmark than they are in the UK, but kind of, I think most of your listeners will kind of be able to kind of see what they do. So kind of popular news, they are known as being tabloid journalism. That's their very core. I spoke to their head of business development a few years ago, and we were talking about AI and innovation. And he had put in place a system that I thought was genuinely brilliant, which at the very outset, that newspaper knew that AI was going to affect them. They knew, but they just didn't know how. So they thought, okay, so we need to do something about that. That's not in doubt, but we don't know where we're going to go. We don't know how it's going to affect us. So we need to think about time. We need to think about how we're responding over not just weeks and months, but years. So they put in a system that within innovation literature is called Three Horizons. So you say, okay, 6 months. It doesn't matter how long the horizon is, but just for the sake of this conversation, 6 months, we need to understand what we're doing between now and 6 months. What's our target? What do we know that's on the horizon? The next horizon is 18 months in the future. They can't answer that question because they're a tabloid newspaper. They're not a technologist. They don't develop a lot of their own tech. So they did something that, from a business and innovation perspective, is absolutely tried and tested. They collaborated with others. They partnered with universities. They partnered with technology providers, and they started playing. They started creating prototypes. They started doing research projects, and they had some metrics, but they were less precise than their 6-month metrics. So they could also measure whether they were doing what they needed to do. And the final horizon, I think for them, was 5 years, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And they had no idea what AI was going to be doing in 5 years. So they worked with a different team at a different university, future scoping, trying to understand, and they had no metrics because we don't know what we're going to have to do to meet, because we can't comprehend it, but they accepted that they couldn't comprehend it, and then they ran with it. So the one thing that they did with the third horizon is say, no matter what happens, we're just going to communicate it. We're going to tell everybody who works for this organization what we're doing and what we found, and that's what we're going to measure ourselves on, how well we communicate and the impact of that. And then whatever they find for that third horizon will eventually get absorbed into another horizon and work it back. So kind of how do businesses deal with that? I think that was from a media perspective. I've never heard another publisher deal with it like that. That's kind of other industries working that way. So that's from a kind of strategic perspective. From a practical perspective with AI, and again, looking at media, we're looking at things like personalization. We're looking at things that will both serve content and generate content that meet users' needs, which is great for users. It's great for the business. there are risks associated in terms of creation of echo chambers. Do you really want people having journalism and media content that they just like and like all the time? Is that good for us? I don't know. It's a great question that needs people of great minds from lots of different perspectives kind of jumping in on that. So, yeah, I think they're my immediate thoughts. The only other thing that I'd kind of throw into this, and it's not a media example, but it's taken from the work that I did around drone technology, which is many industries work in dangerous, dirty, and difficult environments. So traditionally, you put humans into situations where they put themselves at risk, and actually having AI and automation take on those roles and jobs, that seems like a really good thing. So surveying in kind of high toxic environments, keeping people out of harm's way seems to be positive, but equally you could make the point that actually if you transport that onto warfare, that's having the ability to kind of automate and use AI to kill people without operators being anywhere near. Again, that raises fundamental ethical questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's interesting to really consider the number of different challenges and opportunities that there are. When we're talking about AI currently, we tend to spend a lot of time in conversations focusing on the exactly what's it doing, how's it working aspect, than just communicating kind of the outcomes. And I think that's fascinating. I think your point on autonomous weapons that you've just finished on is a great one for the final question to ask you, which is what steps do you think we can take to ensure a positive future with AI?
Yes, that segues really nicely, and it definitely wasn't intentional. Let me just say. So I think this isn't really my area, but it is absolutely critical. So I'll mention it, but I can't speak in too much depth, unfortunately. But policy and regulation, I think, is really critical in all of this. And speaking from a journalism perspective, my industry is very wary of regulation because it needs to speak truth to power. And you can't assume that regulations are good and policy is correct and just. Actually, you need to be able to say, you need to be able to ask questions over whether regulation is correct. But that doesn't mean that you don't need regulation. So I think having conversations at a global level around, okay, what are the impacts, what are the potential risks to this, and we're starting to see. Again, I don't follow this closely, but we are starting to see this. And I'm sure you're covering kind of how various conversations are being had. So really, kind of getting under the skin of the ethics of AI, and from a media perspective, the transparency. Not question, but the point of transparency. How do we know what we know? Is media what it appears to be, is really critical. I don't know how you do that, but that needs to happen. I think within the media, we talk a lot about media literacy, specifically for journalism, people kind of understanding and having the tools. Actually, no, it's not understanding, it's people having the tools in order to navigate this media landscape that is filled with real and fake and combinations of the two news. So it's not just rules and regulations, whether they be voluntary or kind of penalizing, but also members of society, individuals and groups really having the tools to kind of sense make and see the consequences of this. One, I mentioned it earlier, but one project that was a really good project actually that I was involved in was a European project called Aerial Uptake. And the notion was drone technology is an emergent platform, for want of a better phrase, but it has or had very bad reputation because drones had been used to kill people and not for civilian uses. So how do we get the benefits of drone technology? How do we accentuate drones for good in kind of civic contexts? So we worked, I was based up in Preston in Northwest. So we worked with Preston City Council and the university, but we worked with government of Catalonia, councils in Holland, Enschede municipality, a region in Poland, and a town in Croatia, all of which had really kind of explicit focuses on developing drones. And we said, okay, so how do we create an environment that drones for good can be capitalized on? So we broke that down and say, well, we need to look at regulatory frameworks, but we need to spend a lot of time just talking to people. We need to spend a lot of time talking to members of the public who live in that area, people who run businesses, people who have never really thought about drones ever before in their entire lives, and people who are immersed in drones, and figure out what perceptions are, opportunities are, and communicate some of that. And I think, to try to answer your question, Tom, eventually, is what are the most important steps? I think we need to understand all the stakeholders. I hate that word, but it's a good one. All the stakeholders, all the individuals that could be, are being, might be affected by this, and really understand their needs, how it can make a positive difference, their concerns that might be justified or may not be. And then we start thinking about, okay, so what needs to happen to combat those negatives, accentuate those positives, or acknowledge the neutrals. So I think ultimately I'm user centered and user focused. It's all about people.
It does feel like the way to make sure that we can ensure a positive future by focusing on the people. But I think the challenge that comes with AI is when we talk about the people, we have to think about the people whose data is being used to program it, but also outside of English speaking global north group of people who are currently dominating the development of these AI
Yeah.
spaces. Um, Thank you so much, John. I think it's been a really interesting conversation and a glimpse into some more of that kind of AI linked to businesses and organizations. Looking forward to speaking again soon. Thanks so much.